I'm going to hand out some numbers, and I will explain their relevance in a moment.
Thank you, brother.
I want to warn everybody, I was working with my new espresso machine last night at 4:30 in the morning. I'm all pumped up with coffee.
Oh, boy.
All day was on coffee.
Better put him in the closet.
So I'm going to tell you a story which will kind of explain how what I'm doing came to be. I know this is a long time ago, but anybody remember the name Ward Haugus?
Sure.
High priest, wonderful minister.
I didn't catch the
He-
name.
Ward Haugus.
Okay.
He was the district president in Colorado. It was the Eastern Colorado, Western Kansas district when I was growing up. Western Colorado was in a different district. He was the district president, much loved, highly respected, very skilled, you know. Someone said he's as close as we can come to God here on this earth in our district. I mean, he was just much loved and highly respected. Ward Haugus and Ernest Crownover and Brother Hufford came to Pueblo, Colorado around Christmas of 1952 and did an all-day workshop. I confess that my dad stole that workshop and used it, and I stole it from my dad. So what we're doing here goes back to my dad, and from my dad back to Haugus and Crownover and Hufford. Well, anyway, Pueblo, Colorado had an average attendance of about 25. Average Sunday. More on Easter, like 35 or 40, but average Sunday at 25. They had not grown in decades. They had actually been shrinking. So Ward Haugus said to my dad, who was the pastor, let me come to Pueblo and we'll do a workshop and tell you what you need to do if you want to grow. So he came to Pueblo, he did the workshop. After a year, my dad said to Ward, well, we're not growing very fast. We've had 4 baptisms and they were all children of people who moved in to Pueblo and whose children became of baptismal age. Ward said, trust what I taught you. It will work. It takes time. You don't plant a seed one day in the ground and then dig it up the next day because it hasn't sprouted. You have to let the seed do what? It has to grow at its own pace. And different seeds grow at a different pace. He said, just trust. You plant the seeds, you do the whole watering and praying and nurturing, and it will happen. So in 1954, my dad called Ward Haugus and said, we've had how many baptisms?
2.
And Ward said, trust the process. It works. It has worked for decades. It will work for you. It takes time. So in 1955, my dad called Ward Haugus and said,
2.
2. And what did Ward say? You know the routine now. Trust the process. It will work. What about 56?
9.
Yeah, look at those baptisms. Now, Pueblo grew from an average attendance of 25 to an average attendance of 100. They had more transfers out than transfers in and grew despite it. That's why I gave you the transfers. Pueblo's numbers were not from lots of people moving in because more people moved out than moved in. The numbers went up in Pueblo because of what? Lots of baptisms. And the cool thing was, half of those baptisms were adult baptisms. Pueblo went from being a congregation that baptized children only to a congregation that was baptizing whole families. So when a dozen some odd years later, the church came to my dad and knocked on his door and said, we'd like you to travel for us, Dad put together a workshop based on Ward Haugus's workshop, and Dad traveled around to congregations. Now my dad was a remarkable minister. I found one in some old paperwork that I took home for me that I didn't have time to sort out when he died. We had to sell the house. So I opened up that box of papers And I looked through there and I found one Dad's report. So he says, okay, it was pretty much an average year. I had 40 baptisms this year. So Dad was an amazing missionary. I'm just an average missionary. My baptisms are a baptism here, 2 baptisms there, another baptism here, you know. Dad was just amazing. But I stole my dad's workshop, and I have been doing that workshop for 40 years all over the United States. And guess what happens in congregations that have participation in the workshop? They start having what?
Growth.
Baptisms, because they have a process to go by. They know what the steps are. They know what to do. So that's what this is all about. It's about a process that takes time. But if you plant enough seeds, Jesus said what? Parable of the sower. What did Jesus say? If you plant enough seeds, what? Yeah. Some will grow. Not all of them. Some of the seeds are going to go where? By the wayside. All right? Basic scripture ought to be kind of stenciled in our minds. Some will go by the wayside. Some will be eaten by the birds. What's Jesus teaching his disciples? You sow lots of seeds. Some of them will grow. The Doctrine and Covenants says if just one seed you plant grows, how great will be your joy with that person? So Jesus is trying to tell his people it won't always work. Give you a simple example. I drive for Lamoni Wheels. Who knows what Lamoni Wheels is? Okay, some of you may know. All right. I get a phone call. Pick up this lady. I took her where she needed to go. She said, I'll be ready to go home in about 30 minutes. So I went back in 30 minutes and picked her up, and I took her home. She lives way out in the country, long drive. So she gets in the car, and we're driving. Now, one of the things I learned from my dad is you don't arm twist people like the Christian arm twisters. You know what I mean? That they're twisting everybody's arm all the time. And you know what that does? That drives people away. You let your witnessing grow naturally out of what other people do first. So we're driving down the road and she says, do you go to church? I said, yes, I do. She said, where do you go? I said, actually, I go to 2 churches. She says, how can you do that? I said, well, because I'm a minister and I do ministry in both of our local congregations as well as other congregations. I says, in fact, there's one of them right now. As I drove down Main Street, I pointed to this church. I said, that's one of our churches. And she asked me some questions about our church. And I got out to Elk Chapel Road, and I said, now you go up that way about another mile, there's another one of our churches. So we're driving out of the country, and she's asking me all these questions. She said, are the people warm and friendly? I said, the people in both of our congregations are very warm and friendly. She said, that's nice to know. And at that point, I pulled into her driveway and let her out and came home. So what did I start praying? That she'd show up. She never did. She didn't show up here. She didn't show up there. That was the end of it. That was a seed. What happened to the seed? Well, I don't know if the birds got it or it fell by the wayside, but it was a seed. And this is really important. I didn't arm twist her. You know, I didn't say, hey, I'd really love to give you a ride to church. I believe you, where's my little symbol? I believe you provide opportunities and let them choose when they want. I don't believe in ever, never putting somebody on the spot. To me, in my book, that's an absolute no-no. All right. So that's one story. Yes?
Far be it from me to second guess the legendary. But I would say, though, that in that moment of opening the door for her, I wouldn't see arm twisting as saying, Helen, you're invited anytime you want.
Yep.
End of story.
Now that I did.
Oh, okay. I would have thought so.
But that's different than saying, can I pick you up? Now she's got to answer.
Or you can say, if you ever need a ride.
If you ever need a ride, let me know. So those things happen in the congregation. It's different between offering and putting people on the spot.
See your thing.
Don't believe in putting people on the spot.
All
Okay.
those symbols are showing.
We're going to
every
talk
human.
about
And there's a
awareness.
thing that goes around his face the whole
And
time. So,
I'm gonna use both boards.
okay, so you don't know how to fix that.
You wanna take notes, you'll remember more of this. There are people, sometimes they're a sign of politeness. We all do some things we don't wanna do because we're just being polite, right? So, not all questions are curiosity questions, some are just, well, I really need to pretend I'm interested in this conversation, but curious people ask questions. Your questions, your answers should be as short as the question, as short as the system allows. Here's my favorite painful story. Doug Johnson asked me once, Doug Johnson and I lived on the same floor together for 3 years at the University of Nebraska in Cather Hall, in the dorm. And one day he asked me what church I went to, and I told him, Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I stopped there. I did not say, not the Mormons. Personally, I think that you shouldn't add, back when we had our old name, I think you don't do that. You just let the name, if they ask, because if they're curious, what will they say if they're wondering? Oh, are you a? No, we're very different. I might as well tell you my whole schmear, as long as it matters.
Just a quick interruption. Do you now say Community of Christ? We used to be the Reorganized Church of Jesus Christ.
There are times when my missionary instincts tells me to add that because it will lead to questions. But I only add that teaser if some gut missionary instinct tells me to add it and there's time to answer it. You know, standing in line at Hy-Vee is not the time to do that. All right? So, if somebody asks, I say, no, we're very different from them. I stop there. That's all they need to know. We are very different from them. If they ask the next question, see, when they stop asking questions, you stop answering. That's really important. Now, when Doug Johnson asked me about the difference between us and the Mormons, I gave him a 45-minute answer. I have copies of Brigham Young's sermons. I know the delicious and annoying quotes. Here's a quote from a Brigham Young sermon, which I don't share with people outside the church. All right? If I were to catch one of my wives in bed with another man, I would thrust the javelin through both their hearts, and their mingled blood would atone for their sins. Yeah, he said that in a sermon. Preaching was different in Utah in the 1860s and 70s than it is in our church in the 2000s. So, but see, I know those quotes. I co-taught a class on the differences between our church and the Mormon church. It was a college level class, and I and 2 Mormon elders that I got along really well with taught the class. And we went through in great detail the differences between our churches. So I know the stuff. My file on Mormonism is like yay thick file folders with all kinds of stuff and information. I have more information than I would ever need. So I unloaded all of it on Doug Johnson. 45 minutes. Doug never asked me another question about our church ever again. But I was in college. I didn't know. I'd not sat through my dad's workshop and learned when to keep your mouth shut. And I totally blew it with Doug Johnson. So here's the routine when we had our old long name. No, we are very different from the Mormons. That's it. I stopped there. We're very different. That's all they need to know. If they want to know more, what will they say?
How are you different?
How are you different? If they do, here's my answer. What we believe about God, humanity, marriage, and salvation are very different. How long did that take? 15 seconds. Now, did that cover the waterfront? Absolutely. What we believe about God and humanity and marriage and salvation are very different. And then I stop. If they want to know more, what will they ask?
Tell me more.
So pretend you want to know a little more. Pretend you're not. You know anything about my church, and I just did that little answer. Pick one of those that asks me a question.
How are you different?
How are you different on your belief of God?
Okay. We believe in one eternal, unchangeable God. The Mormon belief is very different. Did you hear that? Did you hear what I didn't go into? I didn't go into plural gods. I didn't go into the fact that Adam is now a god. I know all that stuff. I don't go into that. We believe, I answer with our belief. We believe in one eternal, unchangeable God. The Mormon belief is very different. So, man, we believe that as humans we are created in the image of God. And that in some future life we will be some kind of human beings in spiritual bodies in God's presence. The Mormon belief is very different than that. Did you hear that? I don't go into, you can become a god, and you can have plural wives, and you can populate another earth somewhere. I don't go into that. That's what they believe, that's what they taught, that's in their books, that's what Brigham Young taught, it's still in some of their books today. I don't go into that. Do you hear what I'm saying?
You're telling
You
our-
just
you're-
give people little bits and pieces, and if they want to know more, they will ask for more. Do you notice how I avoid going into long dissertations on the Mormon belief? Because it's not my place to describe Mormon beliefs to somebody. They just need to know we're different. They need to know that we believe that God is one eternal, unchangeable being, and the Mormon belief is different than it. That's all they need from me. If they want to find out more about what the Mormons believe about God, have them go ask a Mormon. They're the experts on what they believe.
Would you tell them that if they ask?
I've done that. I said, go find a Mormon elder and ask him.
No, but if you have them on the hook and they're really showing
No, no,
keen
no,
interest,
stop right there. What's the phrase I didn't like? I don't want anybody on the hook. I want interest. All right, go ahead, now ask your question.
well, I just mean if they're, you can tell when you're with someone, and there is a legitimate interest that they're not being polite. And if you had the time in the car driving to Des Moines, and they said, "Well, I'm curious about you said they're Mary beliefs." Why wouldn't you spend the time to say, "Well, we believe that Mary was a virgin, did have Christ," or I don't know why you would back away when they were giving you those buying signals. Dare I say that?
First of all, not often do they ask me to detail the Mormon belief.
Okay.
Second of all, they probably have already heard the Mormon belief. Almost anybody in the United States of America that's a sensate adult knows that they believe in plural marriage and plural gods, right? Now, most people don't know that they believe that human beings can become gods and male gods can have lots of plural partners and have sex and create all kinds of earth beings to populate a new earth. Human beings to populate a new earth. People don't know that. And I don't want to say that, no matter how interested a person is.
But
It's okay for you to know that. I'm just saying we walk delicately. Now, there are exceptions to every piece of advice I give. And sometimes I have had extensive conversations, but that is rare. And it's usually not necessary.
well, in my mind, an easier way to say the whole thing very shortly is that their whole concept of God is hierarchical, that God is a mother and a father. You don't have to go any further with the sex or anything like that.
Yeah.
And we believe that God is, and they're not going to hear that from a Mormon until they've been there for a long time.
That's right.
So if you say go ask a Mormon, they may not get the answer until they're way down the path with Mormonism, and they're able to go to the temple and have temple rites and all kinds of things before they get into
Yeah.
into the weeds. So again, I follow with Paul. Why don't you feel compelled to give them something?
Because in my experience of some 20, 30 people's lives who came into the church, that was never necessary early on. And it's my experience you create complications unless it's the right person. Now, as I said earlier, there are exceptions to every piece of advice I give. I have gone into the details with somebody based on the amount and background and depth of experience. But a lot of times when we were the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I was asked by people who I barely knew, Well, what's the difference? And I went through those 4. Well, what is the difference on God? And I said, we believe in one eternal, changeable God. The Mormon belief is different. It was never profitable with a casual acquaintance to go farther than that. It does more damage than good. And it looks like you're then putting them down. I just say they're different. I don't say they have wretched, awful beliefs, even though they are. I just say, this is our belief, their belief is different. That is not offensive. I've never had that backfire on me, ever, in 40 some odd years of missionary experience. Yes?
When those cute little Mormon elders come to the door.
Oh, that's different. Fresh raw meat. I'm sorry. Yes? Were you going to say more about?
Well, they don't know anything.
Yeah, they don't know a lot of that stuff either.
That is the
But they are Mormon missionaries. They're trying to convert me. And I don't visit with every pair of Mormon elders. I just say, thank you for coming by. I don't need a copy of the Book of Mormon. I have a dozen copies of the Book of Mormon, some in different languages. And I'm a 70 in the community of Christ. And if you want to stop by and someday and have a chat, that would be fine. But I'm not going to go through your whole missionary spiel. Yes?
We're 25 years now into the new name of the church.
Yes.
A quarter of a century. And as you're talking, it occurs to me that of the many people I've talked to under 40, they no longer make any allusion with the Mormon church.
Exactly.
That's the power of this new name.
Yes.
And
So
they
it's large-
only make it if I bring it up, like
Yes.
a fool.
Right, right.
So when I talk about being more like the Methodist Church, or being more like, I use the word mainstream, which I've gotten in trouble with, and when they find out about the lectionary, and if they grew up Lutheran or Methodist or American Baptist or anything, they know about the lectionary, and that's a big window into talking about the enduring principles. And so I just think, am I right that it's been 25 years, like 2000 or
2001
2001?
or something, 2000.
Is that really 25 years?
Yeah, that's 26.
I mean, I
25,
think
25.
we're squandering a new power of imagery. You know, the Graceland kids, it's all about imagery, which is, I have Graceland kids, they want to come and they want to hear a TED Talk. Or they want to hear nothing. They want to just sit and experience worship, whatever that means. Or they want a rock concert. Or they don't want to rock. You know, it's just the diversity of expectation for our 1 hour a week in this culture is tricky to plan worship for, isn't it? And I have an arrogant thing to say. We do a rather good job, considering we're all a bunch of old geezers. We do a pretty good job. I mean, here it is, 10 below wind chill, and we're all here. That is bizarre. I can tell you right now, there's not a Grayson kid out of bed yet. They've all skipped breakfast. In fact, they don't even have Sunday church anymore because they're not interested in this 1 hour of something. I'm going to shut up.
Okay, the Mormon thing, let me grab that and then we'll go to you. The Mormon thing is largely, in my experience as a missionary over the last 20 some odd years, there was a little lag time in the name change, the Mormon issue is not an issue. When does it come up? Now, we're down the road a ways, several steps. There's cottage meetings, which I believe in. It is a crime to baptize somebody into this church with them not knowing about our church. They need to know our history. They need to know the name of our first prophet. They need to know we have 3 books of Scripture and what they are. They need to know what we stand for. They need to know we have shifted emphases over the decades, that we are growing as a movement. They need to know all that. And I do that in the cottage meetings. Now, when I do the cottage meetings, there's always a brief introduction to history. Joseph Smith III went to Illinois, Brigham Young went to Utah. They are an entirely different movement from us. We are the Joseph Smith III successors. He's buried out in the cemetery. He's buried in the cemetery. So Mormonism comes up briefly when I'm doing the cottage meetings, when I say Brigham Young took a bunch of people to Utah. I'm rarely asked, Bill, what did he do out there? Because most people already know enough American history to know what happened in Utah. You know, good and bad. Most people have now, thanks to a recent movie, know about the Mountain Meadows Massacre, in which 126 innocent settlers trying to get across Utah were slaughtered, man, woman, and child. Most people know that story now. I have never told that story in cottage meetings or conversation or anywhere, except it now comes up because people saw it on TV. By the way, the portrayal of Brigham Young in that TV special is not accurate. He didn't say and do all the things that he says and does in that semi-documentary. So this is in-house stuff. I'm just saying if the whole Mormon thing comes up, you say this is what we believe, the Mormon belief is different. That is so simple. And I almost never get a follow-up question. Now, a really curious person, if it feels right, and I'm always praying when I have a conversation, do I share that or not, then I go ahead and do that. So there are exceptions to every suggestion that I make.
I think
Your question.
more of a statement. I strongly believe that any time we try to compare what we believe to what somebody else believes, whether it's Mormon or Methodist or
Catholic,
Baptist or Saturday Adventist,
or Buddhist.
we have to either totally know what they believe accurately or keep our mouths shut about what they believe. And so I think trying to make any comparison when we have so much to offer is a mistake.
Yeah. I'm about talking about who we are, where we came from, where we're going, what we're about. I'm all for that. And it's perilous grounds to start doing comparisons.
Yeah, to echo David's comment, the more we talk about other faiths gives us less time to talk about our own. We need to be talking about our own.
Yeah, here, I got
All
one
right.
quick thing. I found that somewhere, not in that initial conversation, but they'll kind of want to know, why are you so different from the Mormons? And I'll say, we were only one church for 100, and I'm sorry, for 14 years. I mean, I think some of us don't even realize how short a time that was. And when the Brigham Young took off the major part west, that became the Mormon church, and we are consisted of people that stayed in the east or people who realized it wasn't the church they were baptized into and came to our church. Or, in other words, quitters. I mean, that's the next thing you might say. And I'll say, well, it takes more courage to quit than to keep doing what you don't really feel.
Lou, can you say again your opening, what was 14 years?
We were only
When
one
Joseph
movement
Smith
for
was
14
tra-
years.
When Joseph Smith was assassinated.
1830, 1844 is 14 years.
What?
We were officially established in 1830, April
Right.
6th,
Right,
in a farmhouse.
right?
50 people were, listen to this, 50 people were present. But in the state of New York, 6 people signed the charter to become a new church. So only 6 people got on the list. But 50 people were in that room for the communion service where the church was officially established and 6 people signed the charter.
And all that was 14 years old?
And Joseph was shot and killed June 27th,
Right.
1844. That's
Right.
14 years plus a few months.
Boy, does that mess me up.
We hung around. Now, it was 2 or 3 years before Brigham Young went west,
Right.
came through Iowa. You've all seen the Mormon Trail.
But it was
signs
no
and stuff.
50 years of establishing Nauvoo, was it?
It was 14 years, the last 7 of which were pretty iffy years.
I think I might have to go
Because
home to
Joseph
bed.
Smith, just to be honest, started experimenting with really bizarre beliefs.
Interesting to think
It's an
that.
analogous to having their father pass away when he was 30, and you live to be 80, and you go, and you still have in your mind's eye that he's your dad.
Yeah.
But you are now you've gone way past who he ever could have experienced.
So I gave Doug a 45-minute answer to a question that only needed 15 seconds.
Yep.
And I totally blew it, and I ruined any opportunity of ever doing anything ever again. But I was too full of information and no experience and no training and no background, and I was like a freshman in college when I did this. By the time I was a senior, I was way smarter, partly because I spent some time with some missionaries. This is You blew it. What were you thinking? So curiosity, people who are curious and ask curiosity questions should get short answers deserving of their level of curiosity. Now, at some point, it goes to interest. This is when the answers get longer. I don't know how to teach you when the translation between curiosity and interest is, except this: the quality and depth of the questions they ask change. So, this is something only experience will teach you. Is this a curiosity question that deserves a short answer? Or is this an interest question that deserves a longer answer? You should err on the side of caution. You should pretend it's a curiosity question until they ask more and more and more and more and more. All right. This is a better story. Danielle walks into church one Sunday morning, sits down. Didn't know anything about her. She was visiting with some people after church, and she left, and then she came back again. And then one day she wanted questions. I could tell we were way past curiosity. This is a story for here, not for anywhere else. This is her story, which if she were here, she could tell you even better than me. She says, I was raised Mormon, but I made several mistakes. One, I'm a woman. Two, I'm well educated. I'm now working on my doctor's degree, medical doctor's degree. Three, I am, by Mormon standards, an intellectual. That is not tolerated. I was asking my bishop hard questions, and he looked across his desk. This is the Mormon bishop. You know, bishops had stakes in the Mormon church, not stake presidents.
Yeah.
They're presidents, really. They're called bishops, but the bishop looked across the desk and he said to me, I consign your soul to the lowest depths of hell.
Oh my gosh.
Now this story is only for here. It's not for out there. This is her story. That's one bishop, but this is what he said to her. And she got up and left and never came back. She said, I drove by your church accidentally. And I saw Reorganized, and I thought, are they different? Does this story sound familiar? This is like Carrie on a blizzard Wednesday night, who came by and was curious and finally came. And I kept driving by, and I said, God, are they different? How are they different? Why are they different? What's that Reorganized mean? And she says, it took me a long time to get brave enough to come in, and I was scared. Because what if you're the same thing with a different name? But I liked what happened here. She kept coming. She liked what went on. One day, she asked for the sacrament of anointing and prayer. And Melissa and Gloria, those two names are what?
Women.
Female. Took her out of the fellowship room where everybody was chatting loudly, walked her down the center aisle, put a chair in front of the communion table, and she sat in that chair. And Gloria and Melissa anointed her head with oil and prayed. And I looked and I said, oh my goodness. I grabbed my phone and I took a picture. Because that woman had never had women's hands on her head in the sacramental ordinance. I didn't share that with anybody. A week or two later we were having a conversation and I said, I did something a couple weeks ago. I realized that that was an extraordinary moment in your life history, to sit in a chair and have two women perform a sacrament. I snapped a photo. Is that okay with you? She says, yes, I'm fine with that. Did you hear that? Mm-hmm. All right, that's important, because that's a tender, private moment. All right. She kept coming. She kept asking questions. And she said to me one day, I kind of want to learn all about you. So we had what was our first cottage meeting, and then she had a transfer. In medical school, she had finished one kind of training. It was time for her next kind of medical training. She was transferred to Pennsylvania. She was over 100 miles from the closest Community of Christ congregation, RLDS back then, and that just didn't fit her schedule. I've always wondered what would have happened had she had time to follow the whole process through in a loving, nurturing congregation. But it took her weeks to get brave enough to walk in the door. Weeks. But she was here. She wanted details, not about her church. She knew the details of her church. That's why she had left. She wanted to know everything about us. What do you do? What do you believe? How are you different? And we went through the differences in a variety of congregations in quite some detail. And we were just going to, we had one cottage meeting, and then boom, she moved. And I still send her a text message every now and then, ask her how she's doing.
Jim, if you could put us in a situation where we don't have to be afraid of live information being on the internet right now, or people wanting to see the video, I have a suggestion. Why don't you start making names up? Why don't you not name people and just give us the gist of the good story? Would that be all right?
Because those persons know the story.
Yeah, yeah, you can.
It's a trust thing. I've
Okay.
asked permission to share it at church.
Okay.
They granted that permission. It is not fair to them to go beyond that trust.
Right.
So I'm sorry it's that way, but me asking that permission gives me permission to tell you things that I can't tell otherwise. If I've got to limit it to some public thing, I can't share these stories. And these are from the heart. These are real flesh and blood people with real flesh and blood struggles and issues. So,
I have a rejoinder. I am grateful that I know, and I've already forgot the name of the medical student. But in a way, she's reaching out. She's reaching out, and some woman who cherishes being educated has been reached out by this young woman. Now she's probably older, but and I am grateful to her testimony.
yes, and I'm happy to share it.
Coming from you.
I'm glad I had permission to share it
Yeah,
with you.
so you don't need to, if you have permission, I have gratitude that real people are having these.
Yeah.
And I would just add
And-
what Paul said earlier. He's said this before, and I think it fits with this. There's a ministry that occurs for the people that are present live at the moment, and it doesn't always have to be recorded and put on the internet. And because we do that in testimony meetings, for instance. We would not put them on the internet. So what you're sharing is testimonial stories.
Yeah.
And so it's appropriate that it's for the people that are here and on Zoom right now.
I do know those stories, but I feel I have to say, I know a number of Mormon bishops who would never do that.
Which,
And
yes,
who truly would never, they don't believe in that way.
yes.
Uh,
Which is
and-
why I said this is one bishop and one person, not
Right.
all
There
bishops.
are a number of Mormon bishops who would absolutely be,
They'd be
they would
aghast.
very upset. At the same time, as I go to Mormon congregations, who know my role and everything, I am wonderfully welcomed. It is just the best of the best.
Yeah,
And I've got many experiences I can tell you about those. So I just feel I need to kind of balance
that's okay, yeah.
that, but I do know those stories. I mean, we've sat in this room when the head of Kirtland was told not too many years ago by a Mormon apostle, kind of the same thing.
Don and Tom Butler were my two best friends growing up. Their dad was the pastor of the Mormon ward in Pueblo, Colorado. And I have good Mormon friends. And remember when I said two Mormon elders and I, who were friends of mine, taught a class together? So I've had good experiences with Mormons. I have been to the Visitor Center in Salt Lake City. How many times have we been through that place? 3 times. And sometimes we were treated well, and sometimes, one time, it was not a pleasant experience. So I'm just telling The important thing is that's her story. That's what's said to her. You need to understand how painful that was for her. An incredible painful moment to be consigned to the lowest level of hell, and why it took so long for her to get brave enough to walk into our church. That's why she was so afraid. What if they're the same as what I just experienced? All right, so do not read extra stuff into these stories, but you need to realize these are real life stories. All right. You can tell when someone's more interested when the questions get longer and more complex, and as their questions get longer, your answers can get longer. Still not time for cottage meetings yet. There comes a moment.
Hi, Martha.
Hi.
This is the next stage. This is beyond interest. In your gut, heart of heart, you realize this person is hungry for more. They are hungry for us. There is a big gap between curious and interested, and there's a big gap between interested and a hunger to know, and a lot of journey usually in between. I will give you examples of that in future weeks in some of the stories. When somebody's hungry to know, that's when you do cottage meetings. That's when you kind of lay out who we are, where we came from, what we stand for, what we do. Why we have men and women who are ordained. Why we have 8 sacramental ordinances instead of 2. Why we have modern day revelation. How does things get in our book of scripture? Why do some modern day revelations that are authentic not get in the book? We have had prophets present things that they did not ask to be put in the Doctrine and Covenants. Elder A. Smith delivered a prophetic message, and people urged the leaders of the church to put it in the Doctrine and Covenants, and Elbert says no. That was for those priesthood in Kirtland in that event. I don't mind it being shared. I'm going to put it in my autobiography. Don't put it in the book. It was, in my opinion, one of the most powerful prophetic messages given in our church by a prophet or anybody else. So sometime if you have the book, Brother Elbert, go look for that prophetic message at the High Priest Conference in Kirtland, Ohio. It is extraordinary. I use it as scripture in my sermons. Okay. Last step. Commitment in baptism. In my experience, I don't need to ask people they want to be baptized. Somewhere in the middle of the cottage meetings, they say, when can I be baptized? Okay, do I have time? Bob and Sandy knew Ron and Judy for decades. And in Bethany, we have this rollicking thing somewhere right before Thanksgiving called a progressive dinner, but it's not like any other progressive dinner. Some of you have heard this story before. My apologies to you. Maybe you'll remember it better. But some of you didn't hear this the last time I shared this. So they invited her to the progressive dinner. They loved it. Does story ring a bell? We here last week? Came to church the next morning. Even though progressive dinner didn't end till midnight and it took them 45 minutes to drive home, they got up early enough the next morning to drive all the way 45 minutes back and come to church, and they kept coming and they kept coming and they kept coming and they kept coming. And one day in the kitchen, David York, who's another 70 who does cottage meetings with me and did this workshop with me, we're talking in the kitchen, and they were ready. They were here. We could tell they were here. So one of us said, we have this thing called cottage meetings, and you know from last week how I do that little routine. If you want to do that sometime, I explain what cottage meetings are. If you'd like to do that, let us know. And then that's the end of it. I don't ask. Now, are you ready now? They were ready. We were in week 4 of a 7-session series of cottage meetings when Ron said, let's fill the tub. He was ready. We said, we'll do that. We want to finish the cottage meetings first, then we'll have a baptismal service, then we'll have a confirmation service, and whatever. They'd heard about our church from Bob and Sandy for decades. In 4 months, they went from here to here, and they were ready. We did the cottage meetings, and they asked me, we baptized them. They were overjoyed. They came to everything. They came to reunion. What's reunion? Who's allowed to come? How long do you have to be a member to come to reunion? It's a great story. So,
They go to pool. Could you say a little bit about the recommitting to your original baptism without being baptized to join the church? Where are we with that?
if somebody's been baptized at the age of accountability in the prior church or denomination they belong to, we allow them to join our church upon being confirmed. So we do not require them to be baptized.
That's not true with infant baptism, like a Lutheran?
No, we don't, no. We want,
Would a Lutheran qualify?
if you were baptized as a child, we want you to make a conscious decision. So let me tell you Becky's story. Becky and Bill are good friends of mine. Did I tell you about pool evangelism last week? 3 o'clock in the morning, playing pool with the pool shark.
We have not heard that.
Mark thinks he's heard it. Okay, we don't have time to tell that story, except I remember Becky describing her baptism. She told me she was walking down the aisle. She was talking to God. God, I know this is your church in some unique and special way. I know your Spirit is with them. I know your Spirit is in their scriptures. Your Spirit is in their priesthood. Your Spirit is moving amongst the people in some incredible way that I don't understand. This is your church, and I want to join this church. But this being baptized again is stupid. God, I don't need to do this. You know that I don't need to do this. I know I don't need to do this. We both agree that I don't need to do this. She's there in the font. She's in the water. You all know what a baptism looks like, the whole immersion thing. The guy's saying the prayer, and she's sitting there saying, God, I don't need to do this, and you and I both know I don't need to do this. She said, the person immersed me in the water. I came up out of the water, and I was flooded by the Holy Spirit, and I said, oh my, I needed to do this. That's Becky's story. One person's story does not make it church policy. All right? Our official church policy is if you were old enough to understand your baptism, we will accept that baptism. I'm an old-fashioned 70. Now, my preference, I'm not saying church law, my preference as a missionary in this church would be that everyone who joins our movement be baptized by one of our members, even if they were baptized by before. That's my preference. That's not the official church policy. I'm not making war with the official church policy. I'm not saying we should change the official church policy. And I've had a conversation with someone who was baptized. And he says, what do you think? I said, officially, you can just be confirmed and join the church. Personally, I think it would be a powerful experience in your life if you would allow one of our ministers to immerse you in water and say the baptismal prayer. That's what he decided to do. But that's not what's required. I'm just saying, and I don't go around campaigning. I don't go around talking people into being baptized that want to join the church. But if somebody personally asks my opinion, I will give them my opinion. And people are free to do what they choose to do. Does that help?
Yeah, I think
I say to people, why would you deny yourself such an experience? However, I know that, for most of us who are talking to adults, there's a chance they've been baptized somewhere. And I know adults who their original baptism in the Catholic, Lutheran, and have been a powerful thing. And they feel like being rebaptized denies 20 or 30 years of devotion. That is for them.
Yeah.
Right. But I think we leave out that discussion when we talk to people. And I think we're missing one of the powers of our movement.
Yeah. So if I am working with somebody, if I'm the missionary involved, if I've been working with this person, if I've known them for a year or 5 or 10 or 20 years, and I've known some people for a long time before they joined the church, if I'm the person working with them, if I'm the person who did cottage meeting, because, I'll say that for the 3rd time in the last 2 weeks, I believe in cottage meetings, I will present them with those options. I will let them know what I think. I will let them know what the official policy is. I will tell them to pray about it. And I say this to a lot of people about a lot of different things. When all is said and done, you need to spend so much time talking to God about it that you and God come to some kind of an agreement. So don't do what I want you to do because I want you to do it. Don't do what the church says you can do. You need to have some conviction that this is what you and God want to do. And then I leave it to them. All right? Does that help?
Just another thought here, if somebody does choose to be baptized again, that's a choice, and I think it's a powerful choice. If they choose not to, in some ways, they're like the rest of us who have already been baptized, and I would say we should not rebaptize. If I were to come to you and say I'd like to be rebaptized, I would think you have the responsibility as a minister to say, I think we need to go a different direction because we don't do rebaptisms within our own church. If you understand what I'm saying. So we might say, well, maybe you need to talk to evangelists and have a blessing. Maybe you need to, but the idea of rebaptizing somebody who's already on the books in our church is being baptized once.
How might it be different than a couple that wants to renew their vows? Wouldn't that be a similar question?
Right.
Yeah.
But a renewal is not a replacement of the original legal ceremony.
And it's not
I
a sacrament.
hate to bring the word legal into it.
And it's not a
And
sacrament.
you're not performing. Yeah. Now, I will say, don't publish this, on very unusual and rare circumstances, some people who were baptized in our movement have been rebaptized. Now, I can't go into details. I don't have permission to share stories. They are long and complicated and thought out, and a number of people are involved in that process and that decision. I'm just saying it happens. It's rare, but it does happen.
For me, the underlying question is, were you baptized as a disciple of Jesus, disciple of Christ, or were you baptized as a member of a denomination?
Right.
And for us, it's kind of both. When we confirm people, we confirm you what? A member of the community of Christ. And baptism is sort of wedded to that. We don't name the denomination in the baptismal prayer. We definitely do in the confirmation prayer. So, but we all, in our literature, we make references to being baptized into the church. We are not engaging in generic Christian baptisms. We don't fill a tub out front and say, y'all come, we'll baptize anybody who wants to come, we'll baptize everybody. As long as you're 8 years old, goodbye, have a great life, we'll never see you again. We do not practice a generic y'all come baptism. We link baptism to a fellowship commitment, and the Doctrine and Covenants is pretty clear about that. Section 17, Section 42, Section 85 hints at it. I could go on. So baptism is not unlinked to our denomination. It is a part of it. According to our Community of Christ canon of scriptures.
Section 164 changes that.
Does it?
Depends on how you read it, with what eyes, kind of, and how you interpret it. So, there are mixed emotions and feelings and commitments about that as a movement. Yes?
I think the important thing is not to make that person feel like they're being pressured into baptism.
Yes.
And that has happened in our congregation. I think we probably all know situation I'm talking about, and it just makes somebody who really, really feel like they committed their life to Christ when they were a teenager, or I don't remember if it's 8 or 12, should be, if they don't, if they feel like it would be kind of, I'm sorry, I can't think of the word.
Redundant.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this person has been coming to our church long enough to know that she really, really appreciates and likes our beliefs and so forth. But that feeling always is with her, that she's being pressured to join the church.
Yeah, and we should work really hard, never for anybody to feel pressured. As I've hinted at, most of the people that I have sort of led into the waters of baptism, they asked me. I didn't need to ask them. It just flowed naturally out of their desires. And that seems to be the way to do it. I don't want anybody to ever feel pressured. I am so careful about that. Some people say, well, you're not aggressive enough. I said, no, aggressive leads to casualties and whatever. I have talked people out of joining the church. There was a man that said, my wife wants me to join the church. My wife's mother wants me to join the church. I don't really want to join the church. Should I do it to make them happy? And I said, no, don't do that. His wife's mother was dying, and he decided to join the church. And my spiritual instincts told me he bargained with God. If I join my mother-in-law's church, will you heal her? And he was baptized, and his mother-in-law died, and he quit coming to church. Why did he quit coming to church? Because God didn't keep the deal. Of course, God didn't make the deal in the first place. He imagined it. It took months and months of labor and ministry working with that person before he finally found his way back to the church and then acquired his baptism for real. He didn't baptize him again, but he acquired the meaning of the baptism, which was not there when he had been. Now, I don't know for a fact he was bargaining with God, but boy, that's the fact that mother-in-law dies and he quits going to church the next Sunday. Boy, that told me a lot. And I was reading between the lines. I could be reading that wrong. I'm worried about the time.
I just have one question, and not related particularly to baptism, but cottage meetings. Because when I was growing up, I remember cottage meetings all the time. My dad did them all the time. Then I've not heard that word for many, many years, and you're bringing it back.
Because it's a catchy phrase and people ask what it means.
I understand that, but is that being...
They're called home missionary meetings now, and we put out books on doing home missionary meetings. For me, missionary is scarier than cottage meetings. So I don't use home missionary meetings, even though that's what they're called in our latest literature, and we have guidebooks on how to do home missionary meetings. Yes?
I want to hear about that missionary tie.
This is the 9th Sunday of Advent. I know you don't know that. What determines the number of Sundays in Advent? The number of Jerry Garcia ties Melissa gives me at Christmas. So I just keep wearing them. You're going to see more Christmas ties. I've been wearing these since the first Sunday of Advent. Today's the 9th Sunday of Advent. Don't be surprised that there are more Sundays in Advent. God bless you. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.